have partnered to bring this very powerful, meaningful event so we can remember the victims of terror and the fallen soldiers and those who've made so many sacrifices so that we can have Israel today. I'm the co-founder of JSCNY with Steve Eisenberg and my husband, Gavin. In 2000, we moved to New York City, and we immediately realized there was a need for all these foreign Jews moving to the big city to have a home away from home, a Jewish home away from home. And we started with a Shabbat dinner, and from that we went to classes and social events and cultural events until we were having 10,000 people attend every year, over 200 events from 40 countries. In 2014, my husband and I moved to Israel, and then we started the same programming in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv with the goal of connecting Olim to Israelis, helping them to have a soft landing in Israel, and to inspire people with Judaism. And now that we're in the times of COVID, so before COVID, we were having about 300 events a year. And now we pivoted since last year, March, to online events where we've been reaching thousands and thousands of people every week, including now we're having hybrid events. Some of them are online, some are in person, and thank God, Israel's opening up a little. And we have some exciting things coming up. We'd love to meet you, connect with you. I'd love to host you in Jerusalem. I'd love to meet you when I'm in New York running events. And we have events for younger singles, older singles, couples. In fact, in just 2 weeks, we're running our first trip to Dubai. We always run heritage trips, and now Dubai is first on our list. And mostly we've just celebrated 132 marriages, which we're really proud of. We investing in the Jewish future. Tonight's program has been a huge amount of work by Team JSCNY, and a special call out to Stacey Sloan and to Sari Singer from Strength to Strength, our partner. Last year, when we hit COVID, we realized there is no way that we're going to be having live events. And we realized this was a great opportunity to reach thousands of people all around the world. In fact, I know that when I lived in New York, and even though I wasn't living in Israel, I felt connected to Israel, but somehow Yom Hazikaron, the story it felt a little foreign to me. There might have been a little ceremony, a program for an hour, and then it was no more Yom Hazikaron. So we felt that we really wanted to do something, that we could share the human experience, and that we could all be with the victims and their families, the victims of terror and families and people who've lost loved ones. And to the victims who share their story, and to the families, it's an opportunity for us to connect with you, to understand truly the sacrifice that was made for us, and for us to understand that our hatred doesn't solve anything, and we can all be ambassadors for peace. And by you sharing your stories, we hope we elevate their neshamas, and that we can share in your pain and send you virtual hugs. And to the 24 organizations who are sponsoring tonight's events, and our Facebook reach alone of 180,000 people that this is going live to, thank you. And I would like to thank some of our partners, Elenu, American Friends of Migdal Or, Ari Fuld Foundation, the Base Michael Levine Lode Soldier Center, By Israel, Confederation of United Zionists, David Mandel Org, Ethics in the Field, Fast Pass to Love, Give a Hymn, Honest Reporting, Holocaust Museum of Tolerance and Education, Israel B, Jeff Seidel's Jewish Student Center, Jewish Journeys, Jodis Voice, K-Space in Miami, Kedma Israel, Kara Melki, the Melki Foundation, Kol HaNeshama, Kosher Travelers, and so many more organizations. Telfed, if I forgot anyone and we left anyone off the list, please know we thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of you for listening. And with that, we're going to have this incredible program tonight where Sari Singer is going to just say hi for a moment. She's my partner from Strength to Strength. And then we're going to introduce you. We're going to have the siren We have Yoni Mann, who's going to be telling us about Yom Hazikaron, the trumpet, siren, and then we have a lineup of speakers. And the program should go till about 9:20, 9:30 Israel time. And we look forward to having you join us today, tonight, and tomorrow too, where there's a full lineup of events. Sorry.
Thank you, Jody. Welcome, everybody. I just want to take a special moment to thank our speakers, not only for this evening, but for tomorrow as well. It is a difficult time of year. The other time is the anniversaries, but Yom Hazikaron is definitely a very difficult time for so many families. And I really want to thank our speakers, all who really wanted to share their stories with you, because in sharing those stories, we're remembering those that are no longer here. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Jody and her team, and especially Stacy, who everybody has really been working so hard to make this event possible. And we are just so honored and privileged to be a partner with all of you tonight in such an important event.
And now we're going to be having Yoni Mann in a few moments. Okay, so I am going to make a brief introduction for Yoni Mann, who's the senior advisor. Yoni serves as a senior advisor to the CEO of Onward Israel. He grew up in San Francisco. He made Aliyah. He has a deep passion to Israel and Jewish peoplehood. He was one of the founders of the campus department of Jerusalem University, and he works to provide an Israel experience to thousands of people across North America. He also served in the IDF, in the Foreign Relations Department, and his political experience includes advising members of Knesset, and he recently was head of the Olim department of Hitrarot, a Jerusalem party, and he was a candidate for Jerusalem City Council. He has also served as a delegate in the 37th World Zionist Congress, and he's a member of the Zionist General Council. He lives in Jerusalem. He enjoys playing the trumpet, and now we're going to have Yoni.
Thank you, Jody. Wow, that was a very comprehensive introduction. So we, in just a few minutes, we'll be standing in silence for 1 minute as the national siren blares throughout Israel in remembrance of Israel's fallen soldiers and victims of terror. Just last week, I stood along with the rest of Israel, hearing the 2-minute Yom HaShoah national siren in remembrance of the victims of the Holocaust. In Israel, the siren blares in remembrance twice during Yom HaZikaron and once during Yom HaShoah. When the siren blasts, the entire country comes to a complete stop. Cars pull over on the highways, people get out of their cars and stand in silence, people walking on sidewalks, on work calls, people sitting at cafes, restaurants, kids playing in the schoolyard, in the park. Everyone comes to a stop while the siren blares in remembrance of those we have lost. Every year, I visit Har Herzl, Israel's national military cemetery, along with thousands of families and mourners, Jews and non-Jews alike, remembering their loved ones that fell. As the siren blares, I literally close my eyes and I think of all those who've made the ultimate sacrifice in order for us to be here today as a free nation, free sovereign nation. I think of lone soldiers like Max Steinberg, who was friends with a lot of friends of my friends from college in Los Angeles, and whose body I witnessed being lowered into his final resting spot while his memory forever remains alive. I think about the bus I almost stepped on, that moments later blew up into pieces. I think about the time we didn't have the IDF and the state of Israel, the insurance policies of the Jewish people. I think about our people's persecution, our only crime wanting to be a free people in our land. Near the end of the siren, I feel hopeful. I never forget that I'm standing in the sovereign state of Israel due to the sacrifices of those we remember today. The siren will blare in in just a few seconds. And following the siren, it's the custom in Israel to lower the flag to half staff as a sign of respect and sorrow to fallen ones. This will be followed by the trumpet blast, which is usually played alongside the lowering of the flag. Every day we're so focused on our daily responsibilities and thinking about the future. For the next minute, let's really take a minute to reflect, to connect, reflect on the past, and really truly be present. This is the time to mourn and to remember those who have sacrificed for our freedom. After the siren, we'll hear stories and that give meaning to those sacrifices that enable us to be a free people in our land. We are all asked to stand as we await the siren.
What was that?
I will now play the trumpet as we imagine the flag being lowered and take our physical selves and our mental selves from full staff to half staff.
Okay. And from that, we transition to our program, where we're going to start with our first speaker being Steve Eisenberg. So Steve Eisenberg will be, and Steve is my longtime partner in JICNY. I invited Steve to come teach a class, and we didn't realize that over 20 years later, we would be reaching thousands and thousands of Jews through Torah classes, social events, cultural events, heritage trips, and dating programs. Okay, Steve. Steve is a risk arbitrage specialist who served as vice president at Bear Stearns. He's been a managing director of an investment firm. He juggles his demanding Wall Street career, and he is the teacher that everyone knows. He does, in addition to his flagship weekly JICNY class, where he reaches hundreds of people for the last 20 years. He is also the go-to person when people are looking for Shabbat hospitality. He teaches all around the world for other organizations. He's a gifted speaker, a celebrated educator, and we look forward to being able to have Steve come talk for us live in Israel soon while he's making his appearances all over Zoom. And with that, we will present Steve.
So to be a Jew means to remember, okay? They say that the French are amazing when it comes to food. The Italians are amazing when it comes to clothing, design, and Jews, our thing is survival. But we do more than survive, we thrive. And I believe the vitamin of the Jewish people to survive and thrive is to remember. We have in the Parsha, which we'll get to, please God, in August, Ha'azinu. And the Pasuk says, Zachar Yemos Olam, that a Jew is obligated to remember one's history individually and collectively. This is the key to Jewish survival and thrival, if that's the word. That we have the obligation to remember. We have Zachar Shabbos L'Kacho, remember the Shabbos. We have Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, that a Jew is obligated to remember the leaving of Egypt, because every Jew, the Torah is teaching us, is going to have their own personal Egypt, individually, collectively. And the goal of the Jew is to leave your Egypt, individually, collectively, to move on. And therefore, we also have Yom Hazikaron. And where do we see this articulated in the most beautiful way? Is at a wedding. We have a chassan and kala, we have a bride and bridegroom getting married, their happiest moment in their lives. And we say, stop, break the glass. Remember that 2,000 years ago, what happened to the Jewish people? That millions of Jews were killed and were exiled. We lost our land. We lost our sovereignty. We lost our freedom. What's the understanding? I heard this from Rabbi Simon Jacobson, that if a Jew can't remember pain in the time of great joy, he can't have great joy in the time of suffering. So we remember. We have Yizkor, Yom Hazikaron. To be a Jew means to say thank you, Todah Rabbah. We are called Jews because the 10 tribes are lost. Some said they live in Great Neck, some said they live in Great Neck. Okay, but the fact is that most of us come from the tribe of Yehuda and Benjamin. And the word Yehuda, Yehudim, come from the fact that we came from Yehuda. The derivation is from Todah. To be a Jew means to say thank you. And Yom HaZikaron, we are saying thank you, if we could ever say thank you, to all those who gave their lives that we can have this Medina Israel. By the way, the census just came out yesterday, and that shows that almost 7 million Jews are living in Israel out of 9 million. 7 million. This is the first time in 2,000 years, majority of our people are now living in the land of Israel. Amazing, amazing. And I believe it's because, of course, we have Hashem, but it's because we have the soldiers of Israel and those who gave their lives so that we should be able to have this land. Just want to end with this. If you ask any person who was an adult in 1948 and ask them, where were they when the state of Israel was declared, or where were they when Hate Year, 1940, the Independence Day? They could tell exactly where they were. So too with ourselves. You ask any person in this world, an adult, where were they at 9/11? They could tell exactly where they were. This was a monumental event in our lives. In a few days, we're going to have Yom Ha'atzmaut. Okay, today, Yom Hazikaron. Last week, Yom HaShoah. We are in tremendous pain of the losses of our people, but yet we celebrate in a few days Yom Ha'atzmaut. This is Jewish life. The tragedy and Simcha is next to each other. We have to remember the past to catapult ourselves forward. In a few days, we dance, we rejoice. Unfortunately, not in the streets, in our homes, in our hearts, is Yom Ha'atzmaut, the great, great bracha that we have in Israel. And with that, with that is I wish you all a amazing Yom Ha'atzmaut. And then we have to know this is Magefa, this too shall end. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon had a ring, and on the ring it said, this too shall pass. And we're in a very, very special time period that we know that Rabbi Kiva's students passed away, and in Lag BaOmer, Magefa stopped. The plague stopped. The students stopped dying. Please God, B'Yetzer Hashem, so too we're going to see amazing, amazing things happening that exponentially people are going to stop getting sick. Today, I read only 23 new cases of kavod in Eretz Israel. Is we should only see good things. We remember the past to remember that things are going to be amazing. Yemot HaMashiach. Thank you so much, Stacey, Jody, and Shoshana.
And with that, I'm not exactly sure what happened to Steve's feed, but I just would like to mention to everyone that we have some amazing stories that we're going to be sharing. Everything is going to be on Facebook Live. We're also recording the Zoom. Please go to our Facebook pages, JSC Israel, JSC New York. Share this, share it with your family and friends. People watch these stories for many hours afterwards, and we would love to have as many people connect with this story and this human experience and to connect with Israel. I also want to tell you that tomorrow we have a program as well in the US. We have it starting at 3:10 in Israel, at 8:10 a.m. In the US. Please join us. We have Arnold Ruff telling his story of his daughter, Moki, who was killed at age 15. We have Rena Ariel telling the story of her daughter, Hallel, who was killed at age 13. Miriam Fuld, wife of the Israel activist and IDF reservist, Ari Fuld, who was killed. And we also have the Michael Levine Lone Soldier Center as well presenting to us. So please join us tomorrow as well. And there is our program for tomorrow. Okay, and at this point, I am guessing we are not going to be going back to Steve's thing. Maybe we will post Steve's talk at the end of tonight's event. And with that, we are going to go live in the next 2 minutes with our next speaker.
Sorry about that, I was muted. This evening, we're here to honor the brave men and women who continue to fight every day to protect Israel and remember those who have given their lives. We remember the innocent men, women, and children who have been murdered by terrorists and those who continue to live every day with the trauma of what they have been through and the loss of their loved ones. Tonight, we're here to remember 23,928 fallen soldiers and victims of terrorism. On June 11, 2003, I was on board bus number 14 in Jerusalem when an 18-year-old Palestinian terrorist dressed as a religious Jew boarded my bus and detonated, injuring over 100 of us and murdering 17 innocent people, including everyone seated and standing around me. From that experience, Strength to Strength was established, working with victims of terrorism globally to help victims heal and move forward. Tonight, I'm honored to be able to introduce our speakers. Tonight, we are here to honor and to remember. Our first speaker is David Salzman. David currently lives between Israel and Uganda, and he will share his story of surviving a triple bombing attack on Ben Yehuda on September 4th, 1997. He will share with you his story of survival, and more importantly, you will see empowerment and strength after tragedy and how he has moved forward and is giving back. He will also share with you tonight his recent brush with death that triggered many things that led back to that terrorist attack in 1997. We are honored to have him here to share his personal story with us tonight.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, so my name is David Greg Salzman. People know me as both, so you call me what you like. My story is as follows. There was a triple suicide bombing, and I was playing hooky from my yeshiva, from Yeshiva Torah, and I was out having a cup of coffee, and there was 3 terrorists with chomer nefetz, what is that called? The material on them, and they blew up. So I was told I was hit twice. So the first 2. So I remember certain things, and other things I don't remember at all. What I do remember is I do remember saying the Shema after it happened. I do remember running. I do remember being picked up by the ambulance, and I do remember looking quite awful. And then I was taken to Shaare Zedek, and in Shaare Zedek, I was admitted and stitched up, given some morphine, and then I was talking to Bibi Netanyahu. He had come through the hospital, and he actually called my father, and from a little StarTAC phone that he had, and he spoke to my father, and he said, "Hey, your son, he's okay." And it was pretty cool moments for, I think, both of us. But I pretty much didn't want to cry, so I was on CNN, so I realized enough to know that I better get rid of the phone soon and give it back to Bibi, and he talked to my dad. But some of the things that I wanted to make more interesting than just another pugua is that a month ago, 5 weeks ago, I was in an accident in Uganda. I was on a motorcycle, and I hit a cow at 50 miles per hour. And Papa always said, you know, what you always hear, not me, won't happen to me. I'm a safe driver. And well, I couldn't stop that moment. In that moment, I knew when that cow jumped in front, I knew that I was about to slam into it, and I knew it was going to be a big moment. And it was, and it taught me something, and it brought me back to some of the same feelings I've had when I was injured 25 years ago. So what I experienced 25 years ago was something that people want. You know, what do I mean by that? People want to be closer to God. They want to pray. They want to have inspiration. They want to feel like their life means something. They kind of would wish to have another filter off the sunglasses, off the glasses taken off, where you can see Hashem's presence just a little bit more clear. So I think I got that one. As when you know, if anybody's ever had a moment where their life was spared, they realize that there's also a moment of happiness when they are happy to be alive. They're happy to revel in the fact that Hashem spared them. So it could be a pretty amazing moment. It all depends on your perspective. I don't believe everybody who's injured always has a healthy perspective. And I think that's dangerous for them, and I think it's hurtful for them. And thank God I was in the right place. I was coddled with lots and lots of friends and lots of support. So for me, I never really had a chance to get upset or depressed, and I was only very thankful. And so last month when I hit this cow, you can see I've broke my hand here. So I had that moment of like, wow, this almost took me, and wow, I'm still here. That's pretty cool. So you might say, what are you doing in Uganda? So there's a thing where Herzl wanted to make Israel in Uganda. So we say Lama lo Uganda. Well, it happens to be that during COVID, I had just moved back, did my quarantine, my bidud, and they went right into lockdown. I was like, I don't even have a house yet, not for me. And I had some connections. I'd spent quite a bit of time in Uganda, looked into certain business prospects and stuff like that. So while I'm there this last time, being a doctor, being a chiropractor, I have a lot of friends in the field. One of them is Dr. Bruce Kramer. He's a doctor from Florida, but lives in Uganda. And he says, hey, there's some space coming available. And so I took it. It's at the hotel in Entebbe, right across the street, really, really close to where the whole Entebbe raid happened. You can see it. So, yeah, okay, I went for it. Now we have a complementary medicine center. And then a good friend of mine now, his name is Ofek. I believe he's listening. He said, hey, I really want to do something with you. I see so much potential in Uganda. And now we're building a vitamin company. And then next thing I know, I have a tour company. So the dream of living in Israel, but having a business outside and not far away, we'll see how it goes, but it's so far so good. Anyway, back to the story, is that I'm in Uganda, and it's not a place you want to get hurt. It's definitely not a place you want to get hurt 6 hours from the capital where any hospital is. So what happened is, in the middle of the night, it would happen an hour before Shabbat, and in the middle of the night, I got rushed to the hospital in Kampala, in 6 hours in a miserable, very bumpy ambulance ride. And I could tell you that I had plenty of time to contemplate what just happened. And I know that this one, I remember everything on this one. I remember it's like slow motion. You can remember every thought, every little fraction of every emotion that you can have happens in these few seconds. And it brought me back to being inspired. It brought me back to being thankful, as if the gift that I had 25 years ago of being inspired and thankful for what had just happened and being alive and fortunately okay. Well, now I had the opportunity to relive that. So now I haven't had it once, but I have had it twice. And I think that's pretty cool. I'm at the stage of life where, I get to look back and I see what I've done, the mistakes that I've made. And we realize that sometimes we don't always make the right decisions, and Hashem gives us a little push forward, a little punch, a little bit of tough love. Anyway, that's how I see it. And from the bombing experience that I had, I was very fortunate because I let it drive me. I had a few years of some tough times, but after I got my head together, I kind of became fearless and driven and inspired. And that's how I ended up in Uganda, driven and fearless and inspired still. So it's just a big thing. The lesson I like to share with people, if there is a lesson or a reason why we share, is because when we realize what our neshama is and what we're made up of and our potential and what we want to do it, it's amazing. And the thought is always realize that Hashem is with you, he's with us, that sometimes you can learn your lessons or have your moments without actually having to go through the accidents. But the fact that we live through things, and we live through them because perhaps we were Jewish, or perhaps because we have an elevated neshama, and we're able to handle it, because there's a part of me that thinks I was able to handle what had happened, and I was able to process it, and I was able to allow me to make me a bigger, better, stronger person in every way. So with that said, I hope to leave people with the thought of realizing that this is supposed to be inspirational and uplifting, and there's always a positive out of every negative, and to let it drive you and make you bigger, stronger, and better. And with that, sorry, over to you.
David, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I know for myself and probably for many others that will be sharing their stories, not only here with us, but around the world, how difficult a time this is as Yom Hazikaron begins. I wanted to ask you, what does this day mean to you now? You made Aliyah, after your own attack. You've had your ups and downs. You're now, between Israel and Uganda and doing some really important work. Does Yom Hazikaron take on a different feeling for you now as you are than when it did, initially after your attack?
Yeah, Yom Hazikaron for me, it just has that extra little personal feeling, that extra little, oh wow, like I'm part of that. That's actually my story too, and not just seeing something from the outside. So like, for example, people say, especially now with the new generation, like they are 70 years away from what happened in the Shoah. And it's really hard to relate to it. So for me, it's like, wow, I'm relating to this day. I'm relating to Yom HaZikaron. And it just makes it that much more powerful.
Is there something special that you're going to do for yourself? I know that currently you're out of Israel for Yom HaZikaron this year, which is probably difficult in itself. Is there something that you're going to do for yourself over tonight and tomorrow to commemorate, or are you going to speak to certain people? People that maybe were there with you. Like, is there anything that you usually do that's really meaningful for you on this day?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I don't know if it's different than any other day in the fact that I do appreciate people. Like I was fortunate enough to fly back and got in time. I arrived about 7 o'clock on April 8th, which happens to be my dad's 83rd birthday. So it's all special to me. I kind of make it all special, but will I do? Yeah, I'm sure I'll talk with Sherry Wise. I'm sure I'll speak to people that can share my experience and the people I love.
Right. And for people that don't know, Sherry Wise survived that attack as well and was sitting with David, and she spoke last year and shared her story, or their story as well. Are there any lessons that you've learned besides the value and sanctity of life, which I think all of us that survive a terrorist attack realize more and more every single day? Are there any lessons that you've taken with you that really resonate, that maybe some of our listeners can take with them as inspiration and resilience?
There is. That's a great question. I remember when I gave my Suda Hodaya about a week and a half after I got out of the hospital. I spoke at my yeshiva. And I just remember saying, like, there's two sides to every coin. And you get to pick which side of the coin you want to experience something at. And this is every experience. I could have let it defeat me. I could have let it make me upset, tired. What's the right words I'm looking for? Unmotivated. I don't have to get out of bed in the morning. I decided not to go there. I couldn't afford to go there. I knew that if I went to a dark place, I don't think I'd be able to get out. So, for me, this was my big moment to, and sometimes, what I did is, okay, after the last 25 years, it kind of like dissipated. You ever experienced that where like, sometimes you wish you had that motivation, like it goes away a little bit. You're like, wow, I remember how inspired I was after my accident. Can I get back to that without having the accident?
Yeah.
That's kind of how yeah. So, always realize that, like, you get to pick what frame of mind you want to be at. Like, no one decides that for you, and I say that as a message for people who've been injured and they didn't pick the right side of the coin. Well, flip that coin, because it's your choice. Like, you don't have to let it defeat you.
And I
That's my
think
big
we've seen that so much this year on, not only, those of us that have been impacted by terrorism, but really the world of how we deal with difficult things and trauma and life situations. And for those of us that have been impacted, this is like the double part of it. We've already gone through the things that have happened over the last year. We're almost like going through it again for a second time. And I think those things are really, I always have to feel like in my mind, I have to keep reminding myself all of those things of like the inspiring things right after, like, the things that I know you had it also. There were so many things that you could touch on after your attack, of inspiration, of Israelis that were there for you, that didn't even know you, of people that took care of you, of the way things just happened, and the little things that took place that made the biggest difference. And I just feel like, especially over the last year, you have to keep reminding yourself of those little things and how precious life is during such a difficult time. And I think that, that's something that we share, and we have a commonality as survivors, that, we're always trying to make sure that we take advantage of everything in front of us, because we know that it could have been taken away in an instant.
And it sounds so cliche, but people always say, hey, value life. At any moment, life can flash in an instant. It could be taken away. And, that's true, but that doesn't always motivate you. It's like, okay, great. We all heard that from somebody, but then to actually experience something, and then to go through it yourself, and then be on the other side and be like, wow, I just lived through that. So I just lived through it again. Yeah. I mean, I hit a cow at 50 miles per hour.
Only you.
Yeah. So I don't recommend it. And I don't know how, I'll be honest with you, I could have been a vegetable. I could have been, I walked away with a broken wrist and scratches. Don't ask me how this happened. In the middle of nowhere, and then the luck behind it, I happen to have a friend who happened to have a car. What happens if the car wasn't there? Well, I'd be sitting on the side of the road for hours. So yeah, I count my blessings.
It's always those instances of those things that happen. But I truly believe, and I'm sure you believe also, that, when that happens, that your time isn't up, that there's more that you need to be doing in this world, and that's why you're still here. And it's not just about luck. It's not just a luck thing. It comes from above, as opposed to, just a coincidence.
I don't think I'm here to promote Herzl's dream of moving the Israeli state to Uganda, but I can say that if anybody wants to come to Uganda, I will make sure they have kosher food and a place to be Jewish. But so I think I took a little bit of Israel to Uganda, let's say.
Really nice. Is there some sort of message that you'd like to leave our speakers tonight? About either, what happened to you, or Yom Hazikaron, or anything in general, something that you'd like to leave them with that's, sort of special?
Well, wasn't expecting that question, but I'll do my best to answer. Yeah, I think when you have enough time, like I've had 25 years, right, to think about when you asked me that question and you said, Greg, what is your one thing that you've learned, or what your one message, your one lesson? I know it. It's on the tip of my tongue. Stay positive. And I think everybody who's been through something has their one liner, has their one message. It should be the first thing that comes to your mind. And just go with it. Like that's your message to the world. That's it.
Totally. Yeah. Well, David, Greg, I know you as both, so it's all good.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you over Zoom. We haven't seen each other in so long. We miss you here. David is an integral part of Strength to Strength programming and retreats, and he brings a lot of positivity and smiles to a lot of our members. And we just want to thank you for sharing your story here. We know it's not easy. And thank you for being so honest with us tonight.
Actually, with Zoom, it's not so hard. I'm just looking at a screen.
Well, thank you for being here, really.
Absolutely.
Okay, and now I'm going to ask Sari, who is the founder of Strength to Strength. And as she mentioned, she herself is a survivor of a terrorist bombing. And I want to know from Sari, what was the inspiration for you to start Strength to Strength? Like, obviously I understand that you're a victim. Was the organization started that you could be a support group to other victims? Was it started to give you chizuk? Was it started for you to, combat hate in the world? Can you share with us a little bit about the vision of your organization?
Sure.
And talk about it? Thank you.
So first of all of those things are probably reasons, but I will tell you that before I was injured, I volunteered with a number of different organizations working with victims of terrorism in Israel. And I had heard the stories from victims. They shared with me, but I didn't fully understand. I was just there to listen and to be a shoulder and to just be supportive. And after the attack, not only did I understand everything so much better, but I always say this, Israel saved me. The people of Israel saved me on that day and every day going forward that I stayed in Israel, because I lived in Israel a year after the attack. And everybody that was there for me, every person, every survivor, every bereaved family member that was there to either hear what I had to say or just have a conversation with about life in general outside of the pigua, outside the attack, or just to connect with. Those are the things to me that I took away when I returned back to the States for some ongoing medical issues. And when I first came back to the US, I had no support here. There were no groups for victims. The groups that existed were the 9/11 organizations, but I wasn't a 9/11 survivor. And so I started Strength to Strength in order to build a global community where people could connect with peer-to-peer support for victims of terrorism and their families, knowing that terrorism is not one country's problem, it's a world problem. And we all need to come together and combat that hate. And that hate is perpetuated. It wants to instill fear in us. And the best way for us as victims to combat that and to show the terrorists they don't win is for us to move forward with our lives. And so Strength to Strength is all about resilience and empowerment and strength and making sure that people have the support going forward to live their lives the best they can after going through what they've been through. And we work with over 14 different countries around the world with existing organizations on the ground in those countries, including the newest countries we're working with are Belgium and Iraq. And these are established organizations in those countries working directly with families who've been impacted by terrorism. And I can tell you that I have met the most amazing people all over the world that I consider part of my family. It doesn't matter what religion we are, what background, we all come together because we've experienced something that is similar. But I will say this, it is very different for me, especially when I'm with someone who survived an attack in Israel or someone lost a family member in Israel, because there is that immediate connection of understanding not only what happened, but everything that surrounds that attack itself. And I think that for Yom Hazikaron especially, it's so difficult to be so far away from Israel and to be here in the States. But when I have opportunities like this, to speak and to have other survivors and bereaved family members share their stories, we become the voices for those that are no longer here. And that's the way I can get through Yom Hazikaron, because I'm able to share the story of those 17 innocent people on my bus that didn't get to go home to their families that day. And that's really what Strength to Strength is all about, building that connection, that global community of peer-to-peer support so victims don't feel they're alone. And I feel very honored that I've been able to do the work I'm doing. And I truly believe that I survived to be doing this work.
Wow. Okay, Sari, can people invite you to come speak in their schools and shuls and communities? Now it's virtual, but I did just see an announcement that Israel's going to be allowing vaccinated tourists in from May 23rd.
Yes.
So I just saw that. I don't know if it's a verified fact, but maybe you'll be able to come speak in person too.
I would love it. And actually tomorrow I'll be speaking in person 3 times for the first time in over a year. I can't wait. But yes, my stories are not just my stories, the stories of thousands of people in Israel that have been impacted by terror. And when I speak, I'm speaking on behalf of them.
And I do really appreciate you sharing this. And I don't think families or victims sometimes realize how much their story makes an impact. And I can tell you that my husband and I were here we used to come every year in the summer, and we were here in 2014. We'd spoken about moving to Israel for many, many years, but along the way I'd become a princess and I was living in Manhattan And like Israel was this like theoretical place I was going to move to, and one day everybody knew we were going to come, not now, in another 2 years, but we had had the same 23-year plan for 2 years. And we were here in Sukeitan, which was 2014, where rockets were falling, and it was one of those experiences where you can't actually believe that Israelis got out an hour after, like, you know, a rocket or a missile was in their city. An hour after the first missile in Jerusalem, that was the first siren in Jerusalem, people were all out of the soccer because people are soccer mad in this country. And imagine that in Manhattan, an hour after some foreign country just lobbed some missiles towards you and your government intercepted it, and now you were going out to sit in the street and watch soccer. Anyway, fast forward, it was probably one of the most meaningful experiences of my life because, as you said, this is when Israelis come together. And I was with my kids. I can't remember, it was like a semi-final or something, but everybody was watching the soccer out in the street and they were drinking beer. And it was like this festive atmosphere about Ben Yehuda Street. Every bar had a full screen TV in the street and thousands of Israelis were watching. And the next thing, a message came over on the screen and it was in Hebrew. And in those days, guys, I'm a real Belt Shiva. I couldn't even read the Hebrew on the screen. I did not know what it said. But there was silence in the audience. And I said to my son, what does it say? What does it say? And he was like, Ima, it said they found the bodies of those 3 boys. That was the 3 boys who had been kidnapped that triggered the whole crisis in 2014. And it was quite amazing to me to be in a place that went from this like party to mourning. The whole city just shut down and went quiet and screens went off and everybody just switched to mourning. And it was like this collective feeling of the people sharing in the pain of the families. And it was that moment that I realized I wanted to live in a more meaningful society. And that was when I made the decision that I was going to move to Israel. And after 23 years of being a princess, I came home to my husband and I said, guess what? I think we should move to Israel. So, you know, unfortunately, and I did share this when I interviewed family last year, and I did tell the shearers when I spoke to them how this story really impacted my decision to live in a place where people really care about each other as a people, as a whole. And I thank you, Sari, for sharing. And I thank you, David, for sharing. And I actually knew David, or I knew him as Greg for so many years, but I just never ever knew that he was a survivor. So you always have a smile in your face. So thank you for always being so positive. And with that, we are going to prepare for our next speaker. And just a reminder to everyone, this is on Facebook Live. Please share it. We always see that the views continue to go up for a week afterwards because people like you share it, like, comment, and please note that tomorrow the program continues. And up next tonight, we have Shahaf Segal, an IDF soldier and a war hero. And then we're going to have Sari, our one and only Sari, share her personal story. And with that, we're going to break to Shahaf.
So I'm just going to introduce Shachaf. First of all, Shachaf, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is a true honor to have you here. While you don't think this and at all, I will say it, you are a true hero. And when Shachaf and I initially met, we instantly connected. He served in a special anti-terror unit, and he's going to talk a little bit about that. During Operation Cast Lead, his staff sergeant, Dvir Emanuelov, was shot and killed, and Shachaf tried to save his life. And in trying to save him, he was wounded himself severely. He almost lost his arm, and he's going to share a little bit about that with us. Since his surgeries, I don't know how he does it. He's Superman. He completed his law degree as well as his MBA, and I am very, very excited. I'm not excited that he's going to be leaving Israel. He knows that, but I am excited that he will be attending school either at Columbia University or Georgetown in the fall for a master's in public policy. He is not only humble, he is brave, he is a hero, and it is such an honor to have him here with us tonight. to share his story and to share the story of others and to share Dvir's story as well. So Shachaf, welcome and thank you for being here tonight with us.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, thank you for your kind words. Really oversold it. Now they're going to expect too much of me. Duvi, thank you for your story. Thank you everybody for coming and listening to me and to us. Today, as everybody said, it's an important day. It's a hard day for me, for all of Israel, for everybody who. It's sad because in Israel it touches everyone. I don't think there's anyone who hasn't been touched by this grief and this day and the importance of it, and obviously what comes after it, Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's there's a reason why they're interconnected, and sadly each and every Israeli knows it. Allow me to share a little bit about myself. I haven't suffered through a terror attack, but as an Israeli, a person who was raised in southern Israel in a small town named Gan Yavne, terror was sadly a part of my life, as again, each and every one of Israel. If it was exploding buses on a daily basis, or afterwards, rockets being shot from Gaza. And back in the days, up until not too long ago, we didn't have the Iron Dome. We didn't have that amazing system to protect us. So every rocket that has been fired has landed and sadly ended many lives. So as I've said, I was raised in southern Israel by a single mother. She's my amazing mother. If Sari called me a Superman, then she's truly a superwoman. And everybody in my family, everybody in my immediate friend group, my brother's friend group, everybody went to Golani. My brother was also in Sayeret, was also in a special unit of Golani, Egoz Golani. So I knew, in combination of the terror that I have experienced and the very important mission that everybody around me did in the Golani Brigade, I knew that I have to go into the Golani Brigade. I knew it. Sadly, I had a very, very big number in my glasses. I was basically blind without them, which caused my profile, my level of fitting for battle position, warrior position, was not there. I had 72 and it was way too low. And from the age of 16, I had every test at the age of 15, because every kid, a 15-year-old, 16-year-old teenager, goes to the army and goes through a checklist to see where he'd be fitting in the army, and he needs to fill out his where does he want to serve. In my days, today it's online. In my days, it was written, and they give you 3 options. And none of my option was Golani, but I wrote 3 times. Number 1 choice Golani, number 2 choice Golani, and number 3 choice Golani. So I fought basically from the age of 16 to arrive to the Golani Brigade. Obviously, I didn't receive the Golani Brigade, so I refused an order. I basically stood in front of my first day in the army, brand new to this whole system. The officer said, go into the bus. I said, where does it go? And they said, to a different unit. It could have been any unit on earth. I didn't hear the word Golani, and I said, thank you, but I'm not going to get on the bus. And obviously, I got screamed on and yelled on, and how dare you refuse an order? You barely been 5 hours in the army. Who are you to say no? And I said, listen, I respect everyone, but I need to get to Golani. Do you know what happened if I'm not going to get into Golani? I'm going to eat Shabbat dinner outside. It cannot happen. I need to be in Golani. So they sent me to jail, to army jail, which I sat in for 2 whole weeks. And after 2 weeks, they understood I'm a little bit Michigana, and it's good in Golani. Everybody in Golani is a little bit off his rocks. So they said, okay, so he's a good material for Golani. Great, let's send him over there. I signed a waiver for 3 or 4 months to get to the Golani Brigade. And as soon as I got to the Golani Brigade, I said, I'm going to get into the anti-terror unit. And they told me, what are you talking about? You're not even supposed to be here at all. And you're going to get to the special unit of Golani? And I said, you watch me, I'm going to get there. And I was, again, not completely there. And I got to the special unit, Sayeret Golani. I finished the training, very, very hard training for a very long period of time. I became a combat medic. I became the heavy combat medic with all the medical gear on my back, and the sharpshooter, a very important position in the team. And basically made my dream come true, became a warrior, wanted to become an officer, started doing the very important operations that the unit usually does. And after approximately, it was in December of 2008, January 2009, the Israeli government decided, after a very, very long period of time, something around 9 years, if I'm not mistaken, of unanswered rocket attacks from Gaza towards Israel. They decided that they need to have a stronger message sent into the Hamas terrorists, and the message was Operation Cast Lead. Obviously, my unit was one of the first one, if not the first one, to walk into the Gaza, to cross the Gaza border. Basically, we were up north doing very important job up north, which in that point, they flew us in a helicopter to the southern border of Gaza. And then we waited for another month. So what was the point of flying us in a plane, in a chopper to the Gaza border? I'm not sure, but that's what they decided to do, and I didn't complain. For a whole full month, we did training towards the entrance to Gaza, did what we know how to do best, and we trained on it. And then on Shabbat, our officer gathered us together, and he said, "This is not a drill. This is it. We're going in, green light. This is it. No backsies, going in. Gaza, get on your gear. 5 minutes, we're on the way." Without planning, without talking about this, without speaking, we just kind of hugged each other, everybody, the whole team, and we started singing Am HaNetzach Lo Mefacher Miderech Aruka, which till today, I remember the power and the strength coming out of that. Even though it was not planned, it was completely just how our heart felt, and it came from all of us at the same time, and it was a very strong moment that I remember till today. The unit is Sayeret Golani. It's a very special unit. It's an anti-terror unit. Basically, our purpose is to walk from house to house, clear the house from terrorists, and basically not damage civilians. It's a hard job. It's an important job. What happened is that when we walk into those areas, we won't walk into Sajaya and Jabalia, the toughest and hardest neighborhoods in Gaza. Basically, we announce that we're walking in, and we tell the civilians to go away from the fighting area. We ask them to evacuate backwards, but Hamas does not allow it. Under gunpoints, Hamas make them stay in their houses, so they will be at harm's way. Because every civilian that has been accidentally hurt by the Israeli army is a winning picture for Hamas, and that's why they're keeping them there, and that's why they're sending units like ours, so we can walk in, damage terrorists, and basically save Palestinian civilians. So that was our purpose, that was our goal, and that was what we came in to do in Gaza. We walk around with what called iron pairs. Every soldier within the unit has an iron pair. Iron pair means doesn't matter what happens, you're always together. Always together. It doesn't matter what he does, it doesn't matter what you does, you always have a clear sight and view on one or the other, because they are, as you probably know, Gilad Shalit, Oron Shaul, Hadar Golding, and sadly many other soldiers in the past. All they try to do is that they try to kidnap a soldier, a dead soldier and a live soldier. They know the impact that it has on the IDF. They know the impact that they have on Israel, and they're very, very actively trying to pursue it. So that's why we have to have an iron pair. My iron pair was my sergeant, Dvir Emanuel Emanuelov, a very, very, very special guy, which I would love to elaborate on a little bit later. So basically, we walked in together, we hugged each other, and he told me, "May you never have to open your pakal, your medic bag." And no medic want to do that. No medic want to treat one of his friends, but sadly it happens. So we walked in and we fought all through the night. And when I say fought all through the night, I'm talking about IEDs, which are explosives that it can be looked as, they can be on the side of the road, they can be in a kitchen, they can be in a bed, they can be in a crib, they can be anywhere that they can hide it. We had mortars fire on us, and we had obviously gunfire on us. So basically, we had a very rough fighting night, but luckily, all through the night, we had the advantage. But as day broke, because of the brigade behind us, we didn't reach our goal. We had destination to reach on the first day, and because of some sidetracking behind us, we didn't make the goal. There's one thing that Sayeret Golani is always known for, and that no matter what the situation is, we reach the goal. It doesn't matter if just one guy will make it with his last breath, but we will make the goal. So there was no question. We didn't make the goal. We had a few hours of daylight, so we fought all through daylight, which is even harder to do in a very tight fighting area like Gaza, because it's basically just little streets. So we fought all through the day. Sadly, as day broke, one of the teammates got injured very, very badly. He got a mortar shell in his head, and he was critically wounded. And we had to treat him and evacuate him backwards. But there's no time to stop and think. You need to keep fighting. Basically, you take care of him as fire is still being shot around you. You take care of him, you evacuate him backwards, but you can't just start thinking now, it's a guy that I love, it's a guy that I fought with, it's a guy that I basically was with a couple of years, and you don't have time. You evacuate him backwards and you keep on fighting. As we were crossing from house to house, as I said, we were working on houses to clear them from terrorists. We saw, me and my sergeant saw a little bit of a dug up ground next to us, and a very, very shady looking cover on the hole. And we went on the comm and we said, I mean, we're obviously next to a tunnel. Why aren't we blowing it up? Why are we not shooting at it? What's going on with it? And the fear was that the tunnel is booby-trapped and might explode towards civilians on our guys. So we left it alone. What became clear afterwards, as we moved past, Dvir covered me so I can get to the next safe house. And I actually heard a burst of fire behind me. As I look backwards, I saw that Dvir is lying on the ground. I hoped that he is taking cover, but from the way that he was spread down on the ground, it was pretty obvious that he got injured. At that exact moment, the fire became much more severe, if it's mortar or if it's gunfire. And I ran to save him. I was firing my own weapon to defend myself. And my plan was to get to him and pull him to safety and try to take care of him. Sadly, at that point, I got shot from a sniper with a very big round. I got shot straight in the arm, in my left arm. And basically, I could not do anything from that point on. My teammates pulled me to safety, took Dvir to a different location. And what became clear to us later is that there was a terrorist waiting within the tunnel. The tunnel was dug in an L-shaped form towards the entrance, towards Inter Gaza. So they obviously waited for the last guy. They obviously waited for somebody who would not be observant and would not look at Dvir. They shot him 4 times in the head from the tunnel, and they tried to kidnap him into Gaza. Sadly, Dvir died. Luckily, probably because of my fast reaction and my teammates' fast reaction, they could not kidnap his body. And he is today, thankfully, the small parts of that we can thankful for is that he is buried today in Israel, in Mount Herzl, and they couldn't kidnap his body. This was the end of my fighting career. I was supposed to go and become an officer after Operation Cast Lead. Sadly, due to severity of my injury, that was not an option anymore, obviously. In the beginning, I really wanted to come back to the unit. I wanted to do everything. I didn't quite understand my situation because it was very hard to comprehend the fact that a minute ago, I was a super soldier, I was a special soldier, and suddenly I am everything but that. And it was very hard for me and on me to accept, but I switched my recognition. Yes, I'm not fighting for Israel, but now I'm fighting for myself. Now I'm fighting to get back to life. Now I'm fighting to become the more complete person as I can with the injury. It took me 5 years of rehabilitation and constant surgeries to bring some sort of a normal operation to the arm, which is, it's good now, thank God for what we have. So 5 years of complete rehabilitation. During that 5 years, I did everything to contribute to Israel in just different methods. I spoke for Israel, I represented Israel. In 2011, I had the chance of speaking in AIPAC and represent Israel and my wounded brothers, which was a great honor for me. After 5 years, I've decided that that sort of rehabilitation is over, it's done, and I need to find a different outlet to rehabilitate myself, to build myself as a person. I've decided that I'm moving on to start studying. I studied in 4 years. I did my LLB and MBA together, which was rough and tough, but not as hard as boot camp in Golani, so it's fine. After that, I did my internship. I did my internship in law at a very special agency called Israel Anti-Money Laundering and Terror Financing Prohibition Authority. It's harder to say than actually work there, but it's a great place to be, and I really love the job we did, the work we did. To me, that work was somewhat of a closure. I started my adult life fighting terror with weapon in my hand, with gun in my hand, protecting Israel, and I started my professional life as fighting terror with taking money out of their pockets, which I don't have time to elaborate, but if you really want to damage and hurt and dry terror organization power, is taking away their money. Guns cost money, terror costs money, and when you dry those wells of money, you really damage them. So it was kind of a closure for me. And I did my bar exam. I completed my bar exam. I am a lawyer in Israel. Sadly, after that, my mom got very, very sick and very ill. She got pancreatic cancer. So I stopped everything in my life to take care of her. Thank God today she's much better. She's with us. She's strong. She's getting stronger by the day. And I've decided I'm not done with studying. I wanted to better myself even more. And I wanted to achieve a greater goal, a stronger goal. And I've decided that I want to do a second master's in the United States, in the US. I've applied to Columbia, Georgetown, Duke. I got into all three. Columbia and Georgetown now are my go-to schools, which I'm still contemplating between. And that's another achievement that I have, a notch on my belt that I really want to continue and finish the whole way. So nothing can hold me back. Nothing can stop me. Every time when people said you can, every time when doctors said to get rid of that hand, when I was in the operation room, I was still awake, and the doctor spoke above me and basically said, you know what, let's take away the arm, it's done, it's just hanging by thread, it's just a skin, let's cut it off and he'll move on with his life. And I was still awake and I was like, no, let's not cut off the arm, let's keep it. And he was very startled. He didn't saw that coming. He thought I was done, but okay, well, let's do it. And for a very long period of time, the hand was completely dead, completely done. And after 8 months, I had the slightest movement in the arm. And for me, it was the greatest victory, because I knew from that point on that A, I was right, which I love to be, and B, and I knew that there's a chance, there's something to save here after 8 months of completely dead arm. So for me, that was a tremendous victory. So enough about me. I think I've spoke way too much about myself. Allow me to say two things. First, about Dvir. Dvir was an amazing guy. Sorry. Dvir was an amazing guy. Dvir was a sergeant. Dvir came from a more veteran crew. Dvir nursed his dad. His dad actually passed away from cancer when he was a teenager, and he nursed his dad till his last day. Dvir did not have to go into a combat unit. He insisted on serving Israel the best he can, and the best he can was on the front lines in the most elite unit that he could achieve, and serve his country. When we walked into Gaza, Dvir he and his mom had an agreement that he would let her know in a way. He cannot tell her that he goes into battle, but he would send something that she will understand that he's going in. Dvir texted her, "We are going to bring back the honor to the Israeli state, because after 9 years of no response, that's what he thought. We're going to protect Israel and respect Israel and its citizens." And that shows you who Dvir was. To me, Dvir was this amazing smile. You can write his name, Dvir Emanuelov. The first thing, oh, maybe you saw it in the flyer, I'm sorry. The first thing that you see and recognize about Dvir, that amazing smile, the smile that when you see it makes you want to smile yourself. And I can tell you that in the hardest times that I had in training or in combat, Dvir smiled at me, and he was always smiling. At the hardest points in life, Dvir smiled. When you had no reason to smile, Dvir smiled. And that made me feel better. And he always had a good word, and he would always volunteer. And somehow from his vest and jacket, he always pulled something sweet for somebody who was just a little bit down and upset. Always had a little a candy, a little treat, a little chocolate, something that you can eat and make you feel a little bit better. Until today, people are coming to Dalia and telling her amazing stories that nobody knew, even about my own teammates, things that Dvir did in Setter, in confidential ways that nobody would know. And that's how Chesed is actually done. So Dvir is really an amazing, amazing, amazing guy who insisted to come and fight. He was supposed to go into his officer school without seeing any battle. And he said, "I cannot lead men into battle until I have not experienced it myself as a soldier." So he insisted of coming to fight, which sadly didn't end up well. But that's something that you take with yourself and on yourself when you join our units. And I paid a price, which I'm not apologizing for. I'm not sorry for, and I would do it again. And Dvir sadly paid the ultimate price, but I'm sure that he would do it again because he understood the risk. If you'd allow me to say just one more thing, because David spoke about the brotherhood in Israel and how he feels in Israel. There was this question that Sari asked him, and like a message that maybe he wants to. I'm going to answer her question, even though she asked him that. I want to talk a little bit about the politics in Israel. Maybe you follow it, maybe you don't. But it's very reminiscent and similar to the politics in the US. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm going to talk about how it makes you feel, how it sounds, how this is not what happening. This is not the people in Israel. This is the politician in Israel. This is the politics in Israel. When I fought with my teammates, when I trained with my teammates, we loved one another. We still love one another. We had right wing, we had left wing, we had religious, we had traditional, we had apikos completely. It doesn't matter. When I got injured, everybody, every man, woman, and child in Israel came to the hospital to say thanks. And they didn't care who I am and what I believe in. They cared that I served Israel, I protected Israel, I protected them, I got injured. And that's what's important. We are one. What you hear in the TV and the news, that's a BS. I'm not gonna foul my mouth on this holy day, but this is not the people of Israel. This is not my teammates. This is not what I've experienced from Israel and Israelis. And I truly hope that someday the people can affect the politicians, and God forbid, not the other way. So that was very important for me to say. And thank you for listening to me, and thank you for coming here today, and thank you for having me. And Sari, thank you very, very much for all this amazing operation. Thank you.
Shachaf, thank you for sharing. First of all, it's good to see you over Zoom. I miss you. We'll see each other hopefully on my next trip to Israel. But
or my trip to New York.
Or when you come here, but I think I'll hopefully make it to Israel before you come here. Let's hope. It's amazing every time I hear you speak, because I I hear something new, and I hear something new about Zvir a little bit more. And I know how difficult it is for you to talk about him. I know how important he was to you and how much you looked up to him and what a strength he was for you. And I think I just want to end this off on just a question for you to answer to everybody is, as you're sharing your story here right now, just on Yom Hazikaron itself, do you see the members of your unit? Do you see them specifically on this day? Or I know you said you're in touch with them, but do you all get together today? Or is there something special that you're doing on Yom Hazikaron, not only to commemorate Dvir, but for yourself? Because as much as, you are amazing and you're doing all these things and you're nonstop, but I know for myself, and I know we've shared stories of things that have happened to both of us, you lose something on that day when you're injured. There's something that changes inside of you. And, sometimes you can't explain it. And sometimes it's that motivation to keep going and doing more. And I love, the terror financing part of what you're doing of combating it is so important. But is there something that you do for yourself, especially on this day, that's meaningful? As I said, either meeting with, the other soldiers in your unit or someone special in the community or Dvir's family?
Well, tonight it's Memorial Day evening, night. We're not. I'm usually by myself. It's not an easy day. It's not an easy night. But on the day of Memorial Day, we are all going to Mount Herzl, to Dvir's
To his grave site.
Yeah, to Dvir's gravesite. His family is there. But basically, if you ever been in Mount Herzl on Yom Hazikaron, it's all of Israel is there. Everybody is there, except for, sadly, Corona time, which was last year, and this year is going to be the same. We're not going to come to the gravesite, but basically each and every year, everybody from my team, everybody from Dvir teams, everybody from Dvir's family will get together in his gravesite. This is a way for us to honor him. But after that, Dvir has a pool that his teammates and friends built in his name, in next to his house. Dvir was a very outdoorsy guy. He loved walking. He loved Israel, obviously, but he loved hiking, and he loved traveling, and he loved doing tevilah. So his friends and teammates build a little pool in his name, outdoors, outside. And now he has actually an observatory that is being opened tomorrow in his name. And I think that if you allow me to take it a little bit to a different location, to a different place, the question, me talking is about, yes, telling my story, but, and maybe give a little bit of information and knowledge and power to others. But for me, it's a way to keep Dvir's memories alive. If anybody would look up his name, if anybody would just look at his picture, if anybody would think about him just another minute, that's another minute that Dvir is alive, his memory is alive, the message that he have, the good that he did on this world, on this earth is alive, and it's very, very important. And those little places that people can come and look and think and see, this is Dvir and what he's been about, and just think about it for another second.
Well, I am sure that Dvir would be very proud of you and everything you're doing. And I know how much he meant to you and how hard this is for you. And I know that every time you speak, you are keeping his memory alive. And on behalf of everyone listening, and I want to especially thank you for sharing with us tonight and for being here, and just sending lots of love to you and your family today and always.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Shahab, for sharing that with us. And maybe sometimes Israelis don't realize how impactful these stories are to all of those of us who live far. And, as someone who moved to Israel, I'm always still astounded at the fact that I can go to shul, to synagogue on a Friday night, and my kids will play in the garden of the synagogue, or my kids will walk around at B'nai Kiva and hang out there, and that there's no security. And we only know, like, I've traveled to 87 countries, I've been to 67 Chabad houses, and we always see security everywhere in the world, wherever we travel. In fact, I have a daughter with special needs, and we were, I can't remember which country in Europe, and there was a whole, maybe it was Italy or something, and there was a whole battalion of soldiers. There was like a tank outside, and there were soldiers. And my daughter at the time was 8, and she said, Ima, she's like, why do we have to have soldiers here? So I said, well, because we're Jewish. She's like, why do they hate us? Because we're Jewish. And I said, I was trying to explain to her in a very limited way. And she's like, Ima, that's why we have soldiers in Israel, to protect us. And honestly, I never ever forget that blessing. When I look at my kids, I never thought, coming from a city like New York City, where we like helicopter our children, and I would never imagine that I'd be letting my kids hang out at 2 o'clock in the morning, or that my kids would be standing outside a synagogue with no security guard. And we can only do that because it's of people like Shahaf and their service that make not only Israel safe, but Jews all around the world that give us the security. So I can only say thank you, and hugs from all of us, the virtual hug from the collective Jewish community. And next, we are going to have Sari Singer. So I will be interviewing Sari, and so that everybody knows, Sari's always been a personal friend of mine, but sometimes, like, and I knew what she did, and she's spoken for many times for my organization in New York, but there was this moment, and anybody who lives in New York and you've done these share rides of Via, I was in a Via, and Sari landed up sitting next to me in the Via. And it was that moment that, like, we just started talking about Israel, and we connected beyond her just being a speaker at a JRC event. It was at that point that we became, like, we just connected at a different level. And then last year, when the world went crazy and we had to go and move to the world of Zoom, I was like, I want to do something. And this was very early on, before everybody had pivoted to Zoom. And I was like, how am I going to pull this off? I don't know victims of terror. And I just thought of Sari. And we've been partnering on so many programs since, and she's a powerhouse. Sari was born in New Jersey. She's the daughter of a New Jersey State Senator, Robert Singer. In 2003, she was on the bus number 14 in Jerusalem when an 18-year-old Palestinian, dressed as a religious Jew, boarded a bus and blew himself up. 17 people were murdered, including all of those seated around her, and over 100 people were injured. And this led Sari to be the founding director of Strength to Strength, and which we did discuss before, but part of her focus is to bring victims of terrorism together from around the world and to assist them with their long-term psychological needs. And she's addressed audiences all over the world, and Zoom, I mean, all over the world. And everybody should hear her message as she shares her unique insight and the ongoing struggle for victims of terror here in Israel and all around the world. So thank you, Sari, for partnering with me, for sharing your story, and being a rock for so many people. I really appreciate it. And I have a question for you, because we're almost at the 18-year anniversary of your terror attack. What goes through your mind? How do you feel 18 years later? Do you ever get past this? Do you move on?
So first of all, thank you for the kind words, and I remember that cab ride where we both ended up in the same share ride together, and we were just talking, and it was a huge surprise. It is going to be 18 years in June, and sometimes it feels very surreal. Like, sometimes I feel like that could not have happened to me. How could something like that have happened to me? But I know it did. And I will say this, I deal with it every single day. It never goes away, but it's how you cope with what's happened and move forward that determines how you're going to be. And, I always say that I had no control over what happened to me that day. I only have control over how I live my life going forward. And I want to live that life spreading love and kindness, the opposite of what that day was all about. And it is hard sometimes to think that 18 years ago, I was living my life in Jerusalem. I was meeting a friend for dinner. I boarded a bus that I had never been on before, and that someone so young boarded that bus strapped with explosives to hurt and murder innocent people. He was actually the 8th kid that year that had been recruited by Hamas from a Palestinian soccer team. And I think of the fact that they were children, they were kids. They should be on the field playing soccer. The soccer field should not be a place where these young people should be radicalized and indoctrinated into carrying out attacks. And so every year, and really on the bigger years, 10 years, even the 15-year anniversary, but 18 to me, Chai, it is so, for me, that 18, we talk about 18 is life, Chai. And so the Chai anniversary for me is probably going to be very different than any other anniversary, but it's about understanding that the purpose that I still have here and making sure that I'm doing all the things that I can to help others. And I always say, like, Israel saved me, I'm giving back what was given to me by helping others around the world. And sometimes I feel like I get more out of it in helping others and interacting with other victims than I think I'm giving them. And I also believe that, there are so many lessons over the years that I've learned and people that have impacted me in such positive ways. And it could be, if you look at the speakers lineup from tonight and tomorrow, every single person that is speaking this year is somebody who has made an impact in my life in a very personal way. I know these people for many years. I've spent time with their families. I hang out with them. We don't only talk about what happened to us. We share the good times, the bad times, and everything in between. But I do think that for me, as the 18-year anniversary comes up, I just think about how I want to not only spend that day, but remember those 17 innocent people that didn't get to go home to their families that day. And remember that they have loved ones that are missing them, and just remembering that anything I do now is in their memory. I'm their voice, so that they live on and that they're never forgotten.
Thank you. And sorry, I have a very personal question, but while you might move on in a personal way to the degree that you're running an organization and you're a public face and you're a strength and you're a rock, deep down, do you ever forgive the terrorists? Do you ever really move on, or do you move on to a certain level, but somewhere inside you say, why, how?
So I think, first of all, it is a personal question, but I think it's an important question that people need to hear. And also that every victim, every person impacted by terrorism probably has a different answer. I don't believe that I have to forgive, but I don't have to live my life in that hate and in that perpetual state of being the victim. I think I realized early on that I had two choices. I could either be the victim that terrorist wanted and let that pain eat me up inside, or I could take that pain and do something positive with it. And that's really what happened with Strength to Strength. And I think that for myself, besides the work with Strength to Strength, which is so important to me, I do other things. I have a full-time job. I'm the director of career services at Touro College, at the Lander College for Women in Manhattan. I'm just about finishing my degree, my master's in peace and conflict resolution at Rutgers University. And these are things that I'm doing for myself, because I think that as much as I'm helping others, I also need to move on with my life and live and move forward. And I don't have to forgive the terrorist. I don't blame him. He was an 18-year-old kid that was radicalized and indoctrinated by Hamas. But I do blame Hamas for being the ones to carry out the attack and for the continued terrorism that they perpetuate on an ongoing basis to hurt and murder innocent people. But I think that everything I do in my life, every interaction I have, whether it's with victims, whether it's with my students, whether it's in my master's program, I am showing the terrorists that they did not win, because everything I do moving forward, and I think Shachar feels the same way in the degrees that he's done, every time we do something, we accomplish something else, that personal satisfaction is not just a personal satisfaction anymore. It's bigger than that. It's showing the terrorists, look, you tried to kill me. You tried to murder me. You didn't want me to live my life and do things. And here, look what I'm doing. I'm making a difference. I'm living my life. I'm pursuing things that interest me. And I think those are the things that are really important, that we show terrorism that they can't win by combating it with the opposite of what it sets out to do. It sets out to instill fear. And instead of instilling fear, we're moving forward. And I'll share with you just one story I think that shows that the most. Every year, usually, except for last year in COVID, I spend at least a month in Israel in the summer. And it's partially to go and catch up with many of the families of victims that I've connected with over the years that I'm still in touch with. I spend a week in Haifa, I spend a week in Tel Aviv, and I spend a week in Jerusalem. And usually it's a little more like a week and a half in Jerusalem and a week and a half in Tel Aviv, but that's usually somewhere around those times of back and forth. And usually I spend a lot of my time catching up with friends that have made Aliyah, with other victims, with people like Shachar, soldiers that in the army, and really just connecting and feeling like I'm home. And so every summer I do this. And on my 9-year anniversary, I was in Israel, and it was my last day in Israel. And I was with my mother there. She was with me for that trip. And I was back in Hadassah Hospital, where I was taken care of, where they saved my life. And every year that I go back to Israel, every summer, I go back to the hospital and I visit Dr. Rifkin, who is the surgeon that took care of me. I visit the nurses that took care of me on the unit. I usually bring them presents. And I always walk in the door and the nurses say to me, "You're back again?" And it's like a running joke, because I want them to understand how grateful I am that they saved my life. And so this last day I was in the hospital and I was about to leave, and I met up with Ron Cromer, who was the director of communications at the time. And he took care of me when I was living in Israel, because on a weekly basis after the attack, I would speak to different groups that would come to the hospital. And he says to me, "So Sari, it's your 9th year anniversary of the attack. Have you been back on a bus since?" And I said, "I haven't been back on an Egged bus in Israel." And he said, "Well, what are you waiting for?" And I jokingly said to him, "Well, I'll go on if you come with me," thinking there's no way he's coming with me. He's a busy man. And he said, "Okay." He said, "I'll meet you." And we met by King George Street in the afternoon. And I came with a few friends. I came with my friend Gil Hoffman, who at the time and is still working at the Jerusalem Post, but is a personal friend. And he came with two of his kids, and my friend Shelly Gabay, who also survived the terrorist attack in Israel, the Cafe Moment terrorist bombing, and my mom and Ron. And we got back on a bus. And as I boarded the bus for the first time in 9 years, the bus driver and Ron were talking, and Ron explained to him the situation. And he would not take any money from any of us for boarding the bus that day. And I got on the bus, and it was very, very difficult. And I remember Ron saying to me, "Would you mind if I bring Avi, who's the photographer at Hadassah, so we could actually capture this moment?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." And I was really upset. And Avi was taking pictures. And these two girls that were sitting on the right side of the bus, actually in the seats where I was sitting, said, "Who are you? What's going on? Are you a celebrity? Like, what's the deal?" And I told them that I was in a terrorist attack 9 years prior. And this is my first time getting back on a bus since. And they said to me, "Well, where were you sitting?" And I said, "Where you are." And they're like, "You have to come and sit back in the seat." And so I remember sitting down in the seat that I was seated in, and Shelly sat down next to me. And I made it 2 stops. And at the second bus stop, I had to get off. And as soon as I stepped off that bus, I realized I won, because the terrorists wanted me to be afraid to get back on that bus. And so even if I never got back on a bus again in Israel, I know that I accomplished the opposite of what they wanted to do, because I got on that bus and I stayed there for at least 2 stops. Now, I have to say, since that 9th anniversary, I have been back on the train between Haifa and Tel Aviv. So that was a big feat for me to do myself, but I did do it, and I was a little nervous. But I think it's steps, it's a process. But I do know that every little step brings me closer to doing everything that I want to be doing normally as if it was before. And I think that that's important to know, that we all have, it's not a one size fits all for victims. We all have different things we go through, and it's about doing what's best for us in our own time frame. And for me, it's just really important that I keep going and moving forward and making sure that terrorism doesn't succeed, it doesn't win, and that we combat it in any way possible.
Thank you. And Sari, I really believe the message that you're sharing tonight with all the people watching is that terrorism does not win. I'm Israel Chai. And with that, I want to just thank you so much for sharing. And I just want to ask you one final question. How do you feel not being in Israel?
Outside the anniversary, this is probably the hardest day not to be in Israel. Actually, I've been getting messages, and I've been sending messages all morning to people in Israel, telling them I'm thinking of them, those that lost loved ones, those that have been on our programs in Strength to Strength. We run a program called our Young Ambassadors Program, where we bring young people ages 15 to 20 who've lost family members, or family members been injured in a terrorist attack, from about 8 or 9 different countries. And every year we have a group of Israelis that participate. And I reached out to all of them this morning to check in on them and to tell them I'm thinking about them. So it is difficult to be outside of Israel, but what really keeps me going on Yom Hazikaron, and last year was the most difficult year, is sharing my story, which represents so many others. And I'm honored that tomorrow I'll be sharing it probably the most times I've ever shared my story in one Yom Hazikaron, but 3 times will be in person and 2 over Zoom. And I just feel like this is an opportunity for me to feel more connected by sharing the story of so many. So that to me is a comfort, but it's still hard that I haven't been to Israel in more than a year. And I can't wait for the flight that I can get on and come back home and see everybody and just be able to hug everybody and let them know how much they mean to me. So
thank you very much, Sari, and thank you for all your hard work behind the scenes, because we wouldn't have any speakers if it wasn't for you. So thank you for connecting us and for helping us create this really meaningful program. To you, the audience, please share this. And to the victims and to the families who are out there, please know that your message means so much, and we can only educate ourselves and the future generations when we really connect with the human stories. Ladies and gentlemen, the program is not ending yet. Next, we have Brigadier Bensi Gruber, who runs an organization called Ethics in the Field. And the goal of his organization is to shatter myths and present the facts missing in today's discussion on Israel counterterrorism. But he is a vice commander in the reserves, and he's of an armored division of 20,000 soldiers. He's devoted his life to Israel. He's a graduate of yeshivas. He's studied overseas in the International University of Business and Law in London. He serves on many different boards, but he's also a personal friend. And his story is something everybody should hear. After that, we will have a Hatikva that will be live to you on Facebook. And then we invite everybody to join us again tomorrow at 8:10 New York time, 3:10 Israel time, where we will hear from Miriam Fuld, we will hear from Aaron Roth, we'll hear from Rena Arieli. That will be tomorrow. And with that, we are going to share the story of Bensi. And ladies and gentlemen, please, please share this Facebook Live link. Please invite people to join us tomorrow. If you miss some or all of the talks, you can catch them later. Thank you. And we're just waiting for the video to switch.
Shalom, my name is Bensi Gruber. I live in Jerusalem. I'm serving today as a Vice Commander of Armored Division. I have 20,000 soldiers under my command. And when I think about Yom Hazikaron, I just got so many names coming to my head, coming to my mind. Yechiel Weizmann, my chavruta from 13 years old, that, you know, died in Lebanon. Beckmeister, Chobav Landai, Yossi Strauss, I have so many names. Some of them good friends, most of them my soldiers, that I led them to the war, and unfortunately, they didn't come back home like I do. From Lebanon, from Gaza, I think about the children that they could have. I think about the grandchildren. I think about the families that they can build. I think about the so many things that they can do in that country to bring the country to a better place. We're talking about more than 20,000 soldiers that didn't came back home from war. More than 20,000. And each of them has a name, and each of them has family. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people here in Israel that agreed to risk their life under fire to protect that country. They can die. Tens of thousands of them came back home injured, some of them physically, some of them mentally. Tens of thousands of family members. Those 20,000 soldiers had parents. Some of them had families, had wives. Some of them had kids. Some of them had fiancés that they didn't even marry to her. And those families, those family members, think about them every day, every hour. Not only in Yom Hazikaron. So at least we can do, at least we can think about them one day in a year, to understand and to admire what they have done, that we can have Israel here after 70 years. When I think about Yom Hazikaron, I think also why we are here, from where we came till today. Kodesh Baruch Hu did a miracle. 70 years ago, we started from desert, and today we have here a flourished garden. In any way, we have so many people that, you know, learning Torah. We have a startup nation. We are talking about one of the biggest or the strongest health system here in Israel. We have culture. We have creation. We contribute today to the world so much. And just in 70 years, from desert to Israel that we know today. And we have a lot to come. The charity system that we have here in Israel, people help each other. We can see it, especially today in those tough days of the coronavirus, how so many people agree to volunteer, to help, to push, to make sure that other people can live, to make sure that other people can smile. And here I think about my mom and my dad, the way that we did in 70 years. My mom, 75 years ago, arrived to Auschwitz with the whole family. They had 6 sisters, the 7th that used to be a boy, small boy. Her father, Benzi, I named after him. Her mom arrived to Auschwitz. 2 hours later, the whole family went through the gate chamber to heaven. Only my mom and the twin. Mengele searched the twins. He wanted my experiments. So Mengele took my mom and the twin, sent them to 1 year of experiments, tortures, you will call it whatever you want. And then they went to the death march. Soldiers making a lot of noise, walking 50 miles. Benzi, 50 miles. Those women walked 500 miles in 30 days. Winter, 1945. Minus 20, minus 30 degrees, snow till the knees, no boots, no coats, just the prisoner uniform. And my mom carried the sister all the way down. The sister used to have experiments on the knees and on the hip. She couldn't walk. So my mom carried her all the way down. My mom had another experiment. Mengele gave her injection every day. End of the war, she lost the period. 13 years without period. Then the period came back, and the Mashiach arrived. So my mom carried the sister all the way down. They arrived to Buchenwald. My mother worked in the kitchen, smuggled food, and survived. After the release, they want to marry. They understand that they are alone. The sister met a guy in the camp. She married the sister. She had a baby, a girl, and the sister passed away. She used to be so weak from the experiment. A year and a half after the release, she passed away. My mom raised the baby, the girl. The girl, not a girl today, a lady, she lives in Brazil today, in São Paulo. She has 49 grandchildren. Most of them live here in Israel. Why? Because my mom carried her mom 500 miles. You know, my mom told me all the time, Benzi, you're a big hero. You fought in Lebanon, you fought in Gaza, you have 20,000 soldiers, you even injured in the war. For a small bullet, she said, over there in Auschwitz, she would agree to give her leg, just to kill a Nazi that came every night and raped her sister. You are commander in the Israeli army. Your name is Benzi after your grandfather. This is a privilege. This is a privilege. You can be here, you can protect the country, and you can do it in a way that we can be proud. Yom Hazikaron is the time to think about it. Yom Hazikaron is the time to do one small deed. Everyone, that's the only thing that they can ask from you. One small deed to help those 10,000 families, to think about one story, to tell one story, to call the parents, one song, just one small deed to remember those that help us to build Israel and to be here in the Israeli country, in the Jewish country as we are. Thank you so much.
Okay, and with that, we're going to end with the Hatikva, and we hope to see you all tomorrow. Thank you to all the partners. Thank you to all our the sponsors who shared the message, to the speakers, and to Team JRC, and to Strength to Strength.
תם טקס הדלקת נר הזיכרון לחללי מערכות ישראל וצבא ההגנה לישראל.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow. Good evening.